Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today's video is going to be the big law versus public interest conversation that I mentioned. In this video, we do talk about big law in terms of how long we want to do it, why it intrigued us. We also talk about the same things for public interest. I will say that everyone in this video does not agree with each other. So this is a really good video just if you want to see different viewpoints about not only big law versus public interest, but also about T14 or buzz, big law or buzz, how much money we think we really will make. So it's a really good video. So of course, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all of that, and I'll be back at the end for an outro. So guys, thank you so much for being here today. We're going to talk about big law versus public interest, also talk about law school prestige, if that played a factor into your decision. So if you guys want to go ahead and just start with introductions, we can go ahead and do that. Alyssa, do you want to introduce yourself first?
Sure. So my name's Alyssa Jones. I'm going to be going to Georgetown University Law Center this fall, and I am interested in big law, so that's my take.
So Janelle?
Hey, my name's Janelle. I'll be at Georgetown in the fall, and I'm interested in public interest.
Okay. Amirah?
Hi, my name's Amirah Williams. I will be going to Mercer Law in the fall, and I'm interested in public interest.
Jeffrey?
I'll be going to Vanderbilt Law School, and I'm also interested in corporate law.
Okay. And Larry?
My name is Larry. I'll be going to Georgetown as well, and I am interested in big law.
Okay. KJ?
So KJ, I am likely headed to NYU and interested. I kind of wanted to just be able to go either way, so want to be able to do either option, but wanted to be able to go into a big law firm after graduating.
Okay, good. So I guess the first question following up from that then is, why are each of you interested in big law or public interest? Like, what interests you? Like for Alyssa, what about you? Why are you positive you want to do big law?
Yeah, so I kind of have a little bit of advantage in that I've been working in the government, with the exception of when I worked at JetBlue. I've pretty much been in government my entire very small career. And I worked in government procurement, actually. That's the job I just left a couple weeks ago, and I'm not gonna lie, I hated it. So I know for sure that I want to be in the private sector. I know that I've put my time in with government, nonprofit world. I think it's great. It's just not a good match for me. And then for the type of law I want to study, so when I got my master's, I focused a lot on money laundering and financial elements of terrorism and international law. I took a couple of cross-registration classes as well. So it kind of funneled me towards international law, big law, sort of that arena.
Okay. Janelle, what interests you about public interest?
I think it's kind of been just my whole life kind of thing, just the way I was raised. I grew up with a single mother, and I was able to see how community and how all of that stuff really boosted my family. I also have only really worked in nonprofit public interest work, and so that's what I'm really comfortable with. And so it just seemed like a smooth path for me. And it's all about that comfort, that reliability, and just the nature of helping people at its core of why I'm pursuing public interest.
Okay, makes sense. What about you, Amir?
Well, I'm really interested in getting justice for people who can't get it for themselves, in particular sexual crimes and special victims, and as far as the elderly and children go. I hate seeing people feel victimized and not feel like they can do anything about it. And I also hate seeing people get off for things that they should be in jail for. I actually just kind of struggle with wanting to be on the defense versus being a prosecutor because of seeing people go to jail over small crimes, nonviolent offenses, and then seeing murderers and rapists get off because of a technicality or because they managed to lie their way out of it and nobody was really gung-ho about putting forth the effort to keep them in jail. So, I feel like that was my calling, was to be there for people who really can't be there for themselves.
Yeah, makes sense. Jeffrey, what do you like about big law?
Yeah, definitely. So in terms of my background, I come from an investment banking and consulting background. specifically working in consulting for the past 3 or 4 years. I've really enjoyed my experience there, and I just wanted to make a subject matter change. So instead of like solving the business problems of different corporations, I want to be able to solve their legal problems, as well as just in owning my own real estate investment firm. I have a lot of untapped revenue as well as untapped opportunities that corporate law would allow for me to get the training for.
Larry?
So I'm interested in big law because first I studied labor and employment in undergrad, and I felt it to be really interesting, and I think it really pertains to like the struggle that I came from, and realizing that labor law and labor policy really kind of drove that. That would kind of sound like I would want to go in the public interest route, but I think that big law also has a very big influence on what happens in our communities. Also, I come from a teaching background. I've been working for Teach for America for the past 4 years, 9th grade math. And one thing I did realize with teaching is that although my heart was always there for my kids, there were just some things that I just could not do for them because the money, I just didn't have the capital to do it. And I know with big law, that won't be an issue anymore. So like it or not, I will be taking my capital that I get from, working big law, and I will be redistributing it and other things that could help the community and also help my family. And I just know that I need money to help my family. So
Yep. KJ?
Yeah, pretty much on that same tip. Like I actually want to be an entertainment lawyer, so I was kind of, I guess, leaning more towards the corporate side of things. Definitely not sort of straightforward, necessarily corporate as it is. So interesting to learn about that. But coming from a teaching background as well, like I just kind of realized, like you said, like the capital makes a big difference, and I guess in terms of how much you're able to give back. So for me, that's part of what informed my wanting to keep all my options open type of approach.
Yeah, it makes sense. So for me, I'm interested in entertainment law as well. Ideally, I don't actually want to work in big law. I would prefer just to go straight to the recording studio, straight to working with the artist or something like that. But I understand that more than likely I'll have to do big law first. Sort of like Larry was saying, though, I'm also interested in public interest in terms of, like, I do want to have a community center. I do want to volunteer a lot. Like, there's just a lot of things I want to do, but I know I'm going to need money for that. So for me, doing entertainment law, but also having the community center and volunteering and then still helping out people in other ways, it's just kind of like the perfect fit for me. But I definitely get one to do public interest. I just want the money, I'm going to be honest. So, yeah. Okay, so with that, when you guys were deciding on schools, I know, Jeffrey, for you, we'll start with you. I know that you were looking up numbers for sure. So how did that play into your decision into choosing to go to Vanderbilt?
In terms of the schools that I was even applying to, I had a criteria that, the school would have to have at least 40% of their most recent class going to either big law or federal clerkships. So those are really the schools that I applied to. I saw a heavy correlation with rank, but I wasn't really paying as much attention to that. So even when I started narrowing down my final choices, it came down to all of them having about like 50 or 55%, more. Just because, what I've learned in just talking to a number of different folks that work in areas that I want to work in, those numbers really matter. So they matter in a number of ways. And I know there are some questions where we're going to get into that later. But particularly, big law is a very elitist, or has a very elitist hiring system. And you can see that in those employment statistics. So it was basically the number one factor in me choosing which schools I want to apply to, and then the ones that I wanted to finalize.
Okay. Makes sense. Larry, you want to do big law too. How big was that, like the numbers for you when you were deciding?
The numbers are definitely important. I use, like I said in the last video, ILRG to kind of look at the median salaries. And then looking at median salaries, I'm like, okay, well, these are median, not mean. So let me go look and see what kind of contributes to these numbers. And then I went to like the ABA sites and I found the percentages. And then also for me, I also went and looked at the school's demographics though. And then looking at the demographics, I realized that there is such a small amount of Black men at a lot of the schools that I was looking at, that they probably didn't even factor into the percentages that much, right? So yes, I would say the numbers matter a lot to me, because I do want the best chance possible. But obviously I also understand that, you don't need to go to school for like a 95% chance, to be able to get a job. You just have to make be one of the best that you could be, and you'll probably get a chance no matter where you go. But I will say though, as a Black guy looking at the numbers and the demographics, I realized that the percentages for big law did not matter as much for the schools because they probably did not represent the Black males percentage of big law chances because we're such a small percentage of the population there. So I just kind of reached out and actually did a lot of phone calls with a lot of Black men, and the numbers that they were giving me were actually a bit higher than what I would see on a lot of the websites. So.
Okay. You want to do big law too, so how did that play into you deciding on NYU?
I didn't want to do actually big law. That didn't become a goal until I actually started researching how law school worked. And then when I realized that when I started out the process, I knew I wanted to be an entertainment lawyer. And so that was kind of my foregrounding. So I kind of researched the best schools for that particular practice, and used that to kind of inform how I applied.
Okay. Do you want to practice in New York? Right.
Me, I think it's ideal because of, there are a couple other places that are probably good as well.
Okay. Okay, so now going over to the public interest side. Janelle, how big? I don't know. Are there numbers for public interest? I honestly don't even know. So like how are schools ranked on the public interest?
So going into it, as like I told some of you before, I did a lot of my research kind of after the fact. After I had applied, I went into it pretty blind, but it worked out well. So a lot of the public interest side for me was less about the numbers and more about, one, the alumni network, and then two, what services the schools had in place to support public interest students. Because I know that big law is pretty set for you. Lots of schools have OCIs. Lots of schools have that kind of built-in networking with like their BOLSAs will have that type of big law networking and stuff like that. But PI is, at least what I was told from a lot of alum and a lot of employees at the school, is that it was kind of more self-serving. You had to do a lot of the work yourself. So I wanted to look at schools that had that infrastructure for you and had the staff that would help you out. And so when I kind of narrowed down my choices, I did a lot of that digging, and I really looked into the public interest offices, how many staff they had, whether or not PI students who went in as a PI interested student stayed that way, and if the support was there to make sure that they kept following that path. So bulk of it was really just looking at services that the school offered, where alumni ended up, and how supported they felt throughout the process, and then what professors could help, and a lot of that stuff that is less number based and more experience based.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Amirah, how about you?
So I'm kind of in the same boat that Janelle is in terms of, what I was looking for in my schools. I really wanted to be somewhere where the placement in public interest was had a heavy-handed focus, and it wasn't just, the school wasn't just leaning towards big law. And I also was looking at the programs as well. Down south, and really like South Georgia, Middle Georgia, you tend to see a lot of interest in public interest. So they cater towards it a little more than most schools will. So my school, for instance, provides summer stipends for people who who go to intern or have an externship at like the DA's office, the solicitor's office, the attorney general, and things of that nature, because they generally don't come with money and you usually don't get paid, and because that's just the government. But so that really piques my interest. Also, they have a lot of placements within the courts and within judicial chambers, so being able to work closely with a judge or the leading district attorney or even the solicitor general was very interesting to me. And I really like the fact that the school is catering towards, they'll help you tailor your resume or they'll help you tailor your cover sheet in order to get it on the desk of who it needs to go to and really have a true shot at being able to secure those positions. And then they also have OCIs, but they're geared towards public interest, so you can set yourself up for success by the time you graduate and pass the bar. That's pretty much it, really.
Okay. So Janelle, question: you got a scholarship that's based solely on your interest in public interest, right?
Yeah, so it definitely varies by school. A lot of the schools I applied to offered some sort of scholarship for that. I know, like, I think Emory does, Penn does. There are a lot of few schools that offer them. For my scholarship, it was something that you got invited to apply to, just so they could narrow the field down for who they were interviewing. And you got invited to apply, and then you wrote 2 separate essays as part of the application. I think I got invited to apply on a Friday, and the essays were due on Tuesday. It was something really stressful. And then if you move on to the next round, it was an interview, and then you find out if you got accepted. I know a lot of university or a lot of law schools offer some version of that, whether it's like a extra summer stipend or a scholarship. But yeah, my entire scholarship was based on, they said, like, my interest in my personal statement and diversity statement in public interest, and then following through on that. It's a full tuition scholarship, and that carries over every year, so I don't have to worry about the cost of tuition. I don't have to worry about the cost of living. And it comes with extra perks. Like, I'll have a few different types of mentors. I'll have a practitioner mentor working in the field that I want to work in, 2L, 3L mentors. I want to say a faculty mentor as well. And then, like, they have special access to different networking events. And I know, at least this is what I really like about Georgetown as well, is they host a sort of OCI type thing for public interest students, where it's the same kind of lightning round. It's like a 1-day lightning round interview type of thing. So you kind of get a leg up in that as well. So there are a large amount of perks associated with it.
Okay. So for my fellow big law people, did you guys like research OCI at all? Like, did you research how OCI works at Georgetown or Vanderbilt or NYU? I know I did for UCLA and Georgetown and a few other schools too. But Alyssa, did that play a factor into like you choosing Georgetown at all?
It was actually one of the biggest factors, because I know, like, the type of law I want to go into, not every law firm does that. And Georgetown was kind of a slow burn for me. They really didn't come through with the money until last second. So, you know, for a good portion of my application cycle, I was thinking I was going to have to pay sticker. So what I did was I just Googled and just did hours and hours of research to figure out which firms had the type of law I wanted to practice. And then I looked at all of their schedules. It took me like a whole day. And I remember I actually decided against several schools because they just did not show up on the list. And, you know, someone said before, you know, unfortunately, when it comes to big law, there's this elitist system where, you know, it shouldn't matter, but it does. Like, you know, I know, for example, the SEO fellowship is, you know, very hard to get if you're not going to a certain school. And that's, you know, that's kind of, it's a system that stinks, but that's the system. So, you know, I definitely wanted to make sure that whatever school I went to, the firms that I was interested in would be showing up and interviewing.
Okay. Did you also look at like, I think like for some schools, like the top 1/3 of the class, or there's a lottery. Did you look at that too?
Yeah, I did. And so I'll be honest, I've always been an A-B student. Like, I've only gotten a 4.0 maybe once in my life. I get a lot of A's and B's. I'm a 3.5 type of student. So I knew, like, I could probably make big law from a wide range of schools, but I would have to be one of the top students at that school. And I was just like, I don't know if I can do that. Whereas at Georgetown, I just kind of have to be in the top half in order to be competitive. Again, it's a system that stinks. It's based on ranking, but, you know, for me, I know that, you know, if I work hard at Georgetown, it will guaranteed pay off.
Right. Yep, I get what you're saying. Larry, you chose Georgetown too. Did you have some of those same thoughts?
Yeah, I did. So I like Georgetown's grading. So I actually looked at their grading policy, and I was like, okay, I know the amount of effort that I'm going to put into it. I know what kind of student I am. I know that going into a school like Georgetown, I may not be in the top 5%, but I know I could definitely make the top 50%. And that, I mean, it kind of helped me decide, okay, with this grading scale, there's kind of really no way that I can really, fall short of my goals of at least getting into big law. And I felt like, okay, if I go to Georgetown, then there's a high chance that I'll have multiple offers and be able to decide where I want to go in big law. So that way I have a little bit more of a control over my own future instead of just having to pick, one job because it's the only offer that I have. So yeah, it played a role. It played a bit of a role, yeah.
Okay. KJ, what about you with NYU?
Yeah, so actually what helped me with my choice was after I looked that up and I realized like Hunger Games when the lawyers come to campus, and I just began to think like, okay, like how do I want this to go down for myself? How do I want this to play out? How might this look different at different campuses? And then I was remembering like at the same time I was catching up with How to Get Away with Murder, and they were in Western Clinic and their classmates were getting hired and they were tight. And so I realized that like your grades become really important. And so I got to talk with some students that were in the scholarship program at NYU that I got accepted to. And one of the things they talked about was kind of a program that was in the scholarship program where they got to interview for firms ahead of time. So, or they as a result of being a part of the scholarship program, they had some firms that they worked with. So that kind of made me feel like, cool. Well, at the end of the day, at this job, you want to walk out being able to do what you want to do or something financially, feasible. And so big law is financially feasible. And if the scholarship program pretty much provides me, as long as I'm doing well, right, a 1L internship and or a 2L internship, that pretty much leads to the job. So that made the difference for me as opposed to thinking about being on another campus where I'm going to have to work to distinguish myself even more, right, in a super selective pool when it's, D-Day and all the firms are on campus. So yeah, for sure.
Okay. Jeffrey, I know you researched this, so tell us about Vanderbilt.
Yeah, I think, as you know, Tasia, I'm a heavy researcher, so I probably spoke to, upwards of 100 people, whether they're hiring managers at the firms that I was targeting, associates that were at these firms, students that have been at OCI, et cetera. And, they put me onto a lot of great tools. So NALP, it's a directory that you can go to that allows for you to see which firms go to which campuses. So, the Vault 100, which are, some high esteemed firms, they publish where they go to OCI. A number of schools host different job fairs. I know Cornell hosts one, Vanderbilt hosts one, a bunch of different, places where these firms are. And I basically went through each and every one of those firms and looked at where they're recruiting. And it actually eliminated some of the schools that I was considering because, the firms that I wanted to go to, the Vault, et cetera, they just weren't going to those schools. And that doesn't mean that you can't get a job at those firms. You can always, mass mail or, reach out and network directly, but it just becomes so much easier for you to land a job when you know that they're interviewing and you're at a school that has a lottery system where you can bid on those firms. And, for me, I saw that for the vast majority of firms, save maybe, five or so like super elite ones, they were all going to Vanderbilt OCI and, they were hiring deep into the class. So generally, that really informed my decision when choosing a school.
Right. Okay. Another question for you, Jeffrey. So the next thing we're going to talk about is this whole T14 or bust theory. But Vanderbilt's not in the T14, and I think they have higher big law numbers than some schools in the T14. Am I right?
Yeah, that's correct. But, I would say, for instance, that like generally the T14 in general, from Yale to Georgetown down, they all have great employment. I don't think that it's meant to be followed to a T. In terms of where you choose depending on your goals. For instance, if you want to do international law or something that's really government related, in my personal opinion, I don't think that there's a better school that you can go to than Georgetown. Not to say that, you can't do those things from the 13 schools ranked above it, et cetera. But certain schools specialize in things, right? So Vanderbilt just happens to specialize in corporate law. They send about, 62% of their class to big law every year for the past, 3 or so years, right? So I think depending on what you do, you're always going to find a school that's niche for that. For me, it came down to whether or not the school would service my goals from a perspective of, are they sending their students to the firms that I want to go to? And, are they, sending them to do things and to practice areas that I'm interested in?
Exactly. Yeah, same for me. So even with, like, let's say I do choose UCLA. Well, it's not in the T14, it's number 15. But still, some people would say, no, choose Georgetown just because it is right there at 14. And for me, I'm just like, but entertainment law is UCLA. So when people say that, I'm just like, and I don't agree with the whole T14 or buzz. I think you should go to the school that has the best program for what you want to do.
Yeah, I totally agree. I chose Vanderbilt over Georgetown as well. And for similar reasons as you, but I don't think it's a T14 or bust thing, but maybe T14 those are schools that have traditionally given people a great chance at what they want to do.
I have my master's in national security, and I wanted to study like national security law, money laundering, international finance. And so I picked the best school for that, and it just happened to be a T14. Like I had a friend who was teasing me like, oh, like what if Georgetown got kicked out of the T14? Or what if they decided to go with this T13 thing? And I was like, it really wouldn't matter to me because like, yeah, like the ranking is really nice, but I picked the best ranked school for my interest.
Exactly. Yep.
Right. I think that one thing that's also goes into consideration is location. So the T14 does not really encompass the whole entire country. There are schools that are going to have great big law numbers with great salaries or great employment positions from other locations too, simply because a lot of the elitism for law firms also comes with like a regional sense. Like if you want a job in DC, you're probably better off going to Georgetown than somebody that's ranked maybe 4th through 12th, just because you're in DC already. Like a law firm would literally ask if you maybe had like a fiance or something in DC that'll actually want to keep you there, right? So with UCLA, you definitely are going the right way for entertainment law. Like if you want to go academia, like you'd probably want to go to like Yale or Harvard, something like that. But then that's also in the same sense, if you want to go big law, if you look at big law numbers for some of the schools, especially in the T14, a lot of these schools, a lot of the students there don't actually want to go into big law. A lot of the students in like upper half of the T14 want to do academia or some type of government work as well. So the numbers are not everything. It's not saying that, okay, 100% of the students wanted to go big law and 56% are able to go. That's not what it's saying. It's saying that a certain percentage wanted to go and 56% of that percentage wanted to go. We don't know what percentage wanted to actually do it. So that's also something to consider.
Yeah.
I actually had to struggle with that whole T14 or bust thing. I think I actually found like the only reason I know anybody here on this thing is because of Reddit. Reddit kind of slid me in there, and when I first looked, I saw a lot of people talking about T14 schools constantly, and maybe a T50 slid in there here every now and again. So there wasn't really much love for anything less than that. And I was worried for a while that if I didn't go to a top 14 or a top 20, top 25 school, I wasn't going to have a good job, even though I knew I was going into public interest. But it was like, I'm not going to get into the office I want to, or I'm not going to get the position I want, and I'm going to have to take something just to have a job. But after talking to alumni and people who are currently in law school at, various schools, hearing their personal testimony saying, oh, I'm glad I went to, this lower ranked school, or I am, I kind of regret going to a top tier school because it felt too competitive, or, the atmosphere wasn't right, or, I just changed my mind about going to big law and it doesn't really matter to me. So once I heard that, I said to myself, I said, you know what I want to do shouldn't matter where I go to school, as long as I work hard for myself and I talk to the right people. Because I really think knowing somebody is gonna you could know the Supreme Court justice and they'll take you over somebody that went to Harvard, Yale, Stanford, whomever. No offense to anybody out there, great schools, but because they know who you are and they know where you come from, or they know someone who knows you and they can speak on your behalf, as opposed to you just going to interview and hoping that they understand what you're trying to convey to them.
No, I definitely think that's true. I do think that some people also feel like just because they go to a certain school, they're guaranteed a job. And I don't think they understand you still have to network. People still have to like you. There's just not just, oh, you went to Harvard, so you automatically get a job. Well, maybe Harvard's not a good example because you might. But let's say another school in T14, though, it's not an automatic thing. Like, you still have to put in work. You still have to have the grades. You still have to network. You still have to do other things. You don't just, go to class and then automatically, oh, I got a job. That's not how it works. So
I wish.
Exactly. So question, does everybody plan on working their 1L year? I know I'm going to try to get a summer job my 1L year, but I know definitely that's pretty hard. But I don't think that's hard for public interest, right? Like, don't a lot of schools have guaranteed funds for public interest during the summer?
I know a lot of schools do something like that. I want to say Georgetown's on the lower end. I think it's like $3,500 your 1L year, and then $5,000 and above after that, depending on what you're doing. But that's also something to be very careful of and to kind of read the fine lines, because they do kind of stipulate what you have to do. Sometimes they only apply to unpaid work. Sometimes they supplement if you're not getting paid enough to support yourself. It's one way to kind of help you continue to pursue that. It's still nothing compared to what I think people who do associateships over the summer, but it is some sort of stipend to at least make sure you can live somewhere and eat ramen for dinner or something.
Right. KJ?
I did want to add to the point about big law or bust that I did know some people who went to law school, that didn't go T14, or that, it was a rough time, around 2008 through to, for a while, it was a rough time for a lot of people, including lawyers. And I just knew some people who they knew I was going, and they would always just advise me about it. Especially my professors would also talk to me about it. So I know this goes out to YouTube. So just for folks listening, the big law or bust is really making sure that you essentially can, with working hard, place at that job that gives the money that you're paying for the law degree, allows you to pay that money back, because it's not, sometimes you can just go for degrees and then you owe $200K, and the school that you went to isn't really gonna necessarily be a degree that you can walk with the prestige to just another area of the country or something else like that, right? Or you end up doing a job that's $60,000 a year. The loans are hard to pay back, or you end up doing a job you hate that has nothing to do with the law because you got to pay back loans. So there are a lot of options. So I think the big law or bust, in terms of what I thought about when I heard about big law or bust, was understanding that it's outside the realm of niche interest in particular areas of law. So if you know, for example, that you want to be a criminal lawyer, then that might not matter to you. And you want to, be smart about where you're applying and how you're applying and what you're willing to put in to get that degree, right? So be smart about how you're applying and what you want to do. And it depends on your interest. You want to be able to, though, be able to get into, as many options as possible. So their little ladder, the closer you go to the top, it just means more options you have, right? So at a school like NYU, you can go into academia, but it's not necessarily that it broadens or gives you as easy a walk as Harvard, Yale, or Stanford, right? But it is up there in a way where you can go into academia with the supports given, et cetera, et cetera. So all that to say, big law or bust has its place. Don't go to law school and walk out with a bunch of debt for no reason just to say you have a law degree, because the way society is going now, there's tons of ways to make money and all that jazz.
True.
Yep.
Yeah. It would be nice to just have a bunch of money fall into your lap, but unfortunately, it's not the way the world works. But don't.
And then also, sorry, another point is that our peers, right? They're coming from families with wealth, so they might need someone in the family to just become a lawyer for whatever reason, right? Or they might just take the LSAT and score at whatever, without trying hard, because they know it'll get them into a regional school at a full scholarship, because they just need this to kind of move on to the next step, right? So with the back, just saying, putting that out there, having a background in admissions too, like, the power is yours, and you want to kind of levy that really well with how you apply, because there's tons of people applying for different reasons, and we're in a different place as people of color than our peers, and they have lots of money, and so all that jazz in terms of paying back loans afterwards. Sorry to ramble, but yeah.
No, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, no, you're right. And with that, like when you're applying to schools, it's often kind of good to balance like the place that you're applying to, because one, you'll be able to negotiate, and then two, if you want to really go chase prestige, then you just have to really get the best LSAT score that you can, because that's going to end up paying you. If you're a minority, you're going to get paid because of your LSAT score a lot of the time. If you can get the LSAT score close to the median of a T14 school, they're going to pay you to go there, and that's just bottom line.
And the fact all of us here could probably have gotten full rides or close to full rides at schools that are in the top 50 in general also. So that's the thing to think about, particularly as a minority, is that you want this degree for what it'll give you, but you don't necessarily want to walk away with $200K, $300K in debt to do something that's a passion that you're not going to necessarily make a whole lot of money to do.
That's part of what led me to choose, or at least narrow down the schools that I was going to choose. Good Lord, because I was like, screw the LSAT, because it was the most awful test I've ever taken. And after the third time, I was like, I can't do this anymore. So I lucked out and got a decent score, which put me either above, at, or maybe 1 or 2 points below the medians for the schools that I applied for. And being a minority, being a double minority at that, and it might actually be different for Black men as well, because there's fewer Black men than Black women. So even that might be another boost there. But I could tell I got money based off of that, because I would talk to, some of my white friends who were in law school, my Hispanic ones, and they were saying that, they got a scholarship, but most people would only get like between 40 and 60%, as opposed to some of their Black counterparts, because of the whole minority issue. And schools wanted to boost their diversity rankings. And that actually ties into your question about summer stipends for PIs. Schools that tend to have a bigger focus on them, from what I can tell, generally give a good amount of stipend money, which is part of the reason why I chose the school that I did, because of the fact, I think I read they give like $6,000 for the summer, based on what you want to do, but it's got to be within like the AG's office, the DA's office, and then who's the other one? I think it's not the Justice Society. There's a pro bono program. Oh, legal aid. Duh. Working for any one of those, because that's going to be your biggest area of public interest. You're either going to be working for the people in terms of making sure that everybody's safe and that people are following the rules that they're supposed to be following, or you're going to serve those who can't afford, the $1,000 an hour lawyer to get them off of a case. So, going to a lower ranked school and being a minority, I feel is beneficial for those who are very debt adverse and are very conscious of their money. I had to sit and take a minute because I totally forgot about the summer and that I have to pay rent during the summer and actually live. And as much fun as it would be to go to New York or go to Vanderbilt or go somewhere outside of Georgia, I can't afford summer rent and not be able to work and not have a guaranteed job. So at least at this rate, I'm doing what I need to keep myself from far away from loans as possible. But still maintain a good education and still do what I want to do.
Yeah, I also want to add to that because I am also very debt averse, and I think a lot of that comes from looking at PI salaries and not seeing that 180K, not seeing that 190K, just being like, I'm going into law school for all this debt for a job that is not up there. And so a lot of that was me weighing the cost of living, cost of attendance, and looking at LRAPs and kind of thinking, like, tying this back into the rank and that T14 or bus conversation that I missed out on. It was just, I was weighing the option, is it better to go to a higher ranked school with less scholarship and depend on the LRAP, or is it better to go to a lower ranked school with a better scholarship and just graduate with less debt? And so there was a lot to be weighed, and I mean, the big law thought continues to cross my mind because I think, like, everyone in my family, I'll be the first lawyer in my family. Everyone's thinking, oh, you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to make the big bucks. But it's almost like, no, because I'm choosing to make pennies on the hour. And I'm choosing to do that, which is, that's a wild choice, to go into so much debt to make no money. I don't want to say no money, but to make less money than people assume you're making. And so before I got Bloom, I was leaning towards a lower ranked school with a higher scholarship because it was like, at that point, the ranking doesn't matter, and the ranking won't matter when I have 6 figures of debt and I'm making $60,000 a year. Yes, ranking is one thing, and yes, ranking can open those doors, and higher ranked schools tend to have better LRAPs, but I don't want to necessarily depend on that to pay debt. I just would not like to look at a larger number. And so, yeah, it's difficult. And I mean, people who talk to me on a regular basis, and that every day I'm like, what if I did big law? Like, what if I just changed my mind? Because that debt is really scary, and I'm very debt averse. But yeah, at the end of the day, if not for a Georgetown scholarship, I would have gone to a lower ranked school just for the scholarship, because I know, like, big law, higher ranked schools can open more doors for that, but for public interest, and like, people can chime in on this, I do think it can be less important unless you want to go into those elite unicorn PI positions. I was just really set on minimizing debt so that I could do what I wanted to do without the pressure and without the pain of having that debt hanging over my head for years and years and years after I graduated.
Right. Jeffrey, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring something up in terms of scholarship. So yeah, I am in a bit of a unique position with that, just because I've been, within a very lucrative industry for a few years now. So it wouldn't have made sense for me to go to a school that I would graduate from and, make less than what I'm making now. So that kind of put me in a privileged position when I was applying, just because, I've saved a lot of money, and me personally, I just wasn't going to graduate with any debt whatsoever. I just needed to go to a school that was going to put me in a position where, was going to give me enough scholarship where I don't graduate with any debt. So, I did get into one school that I was particularly interested in originally, other than its location. That was good for my goals as well. But, when scholarship comes into play, debt will make you poor. So when you look at those salaries for big law and so forth, I know people open their eyes and, say, oh my goodness, it's such a high paying, position. That high paying position can become very low paying very quickly if you, come out with $300,000 worth of debt. So that was something I was very mindful of when I was applying as well.
So I did have a conversation with a few people, but one person in particular, something that she said that stood out to me. She was like, a lot of people that she knows that are still in big law, they're in big law because they have to be, because they cannot pay their bills, they cannot pay their debt off if they don't stay in big law. But she also stated that they were miserable and very, depressed. So there's a lot of things to balance out with. I know a lot of people are like, oh, there's money. But you also need to kind of think about the culture of the firms you can work at. There's just a lot of different factors because, yeah, you can make 190 and then eventually make 400, I think, is like the highest number it goes to or something. But if you are stuck.
You can make $1 million a year as a partner, for sure.
Yeah, but I think for some people, though, they really do end up hating big law, but they have to stay here because they've started living this lifestyle that makes them have to work there. So, I think there's a lot of different things. I know something that Janelle wanted to talk about was about the whole thing about people choosing big law just for the money.
This is something that I wanted to ask the big law folks.